All right. So there was a comment that I made in the video I did about this guy, Brad Marchand, that without him, the Bruins are hooped. And then somebody said, "Well, there's only 16 points between him and the next highest point getter in Boston." To which I said, "I think that MVP should be a guy who clearly is leaps and bounds above his teammates. Now, this can also be a goaltender. But it's interesting to see the guys who are actually in really good years. So Marchand's the obvious one, and he's an outlier for MVP. Getzlaf, 58 points. He's 8 points ahead of Kessler. Verbata is 17 points in the lead in Arizona, which is more a statement of just how bad Arizona is than how good Verbata is. Eichel is 48 points. He's in the lead by 2 points. I have a star here because he's missed a lot of games. So Eichel would have a much bigger lead if he played every game. Now, Gaudreau is in that same position, 49 points, 1 point ahead of second place on the team, but he's played fewer games and would have a much bigger lead. Skinner in Carolina, 46 points. Jeff Skinner's 5 points free of the second place scorer on the team. Patrick Kane. This is where it gets interesting too. Patrick Kane, 77 points, or 14 points ahead of second place in Chicago. Nathan MacKinnon's number one in Colorado, 44 points, 7 points ahead of second place. Colorado, the fact that they can't score with that young lineup is insane. Cam Atkinson, 59 points in Columbus, 5 points clear. Tyler Seguin, 68 points in Dallas, 5 points clear. Henrik Zetterberg, 57 points, 22 points ahead of second place. Because Vanek was traded, he's now 22 points ahead of second place on the team. That's crazy. McDavid, 79 points, 18 points clear of second place on the team. Trocheck, 49 points for Florida, 3 points ahead. Jeff Carter in LA, 60 points, 17 points ahead of second place. Jeff Carter was getting a lot of buzz for MVP before the recent tank by LA. LA's had some problems over the last couple of weeks. Marcus Granlund is Michael's brother. Nice save. Michael Granlund with his 65 points in Minnesota. He's 12 points ahead of second place. I've been criticized for not talking much about Michael Granlund, and that's valid. It's valid. But Granlund's been full value. Max Pacioretty in Montreal, 60 points, 13 points clear second place, which is Radulov. It's interesting, too, because even Montreal fans tend to slag Pacioretty a little bit. Fans tend to non-Montreal fans like Pacioretty, but he scores a lot of points and a lot of goals by today's standards, so I wouldn't slag him just yet. Ryan Johansson in Nashville, 55 points, 2 points clear. Kyle Palmieri in New Jersey, 48 points, he's 1 point ahead. John Tavares, 60 points in New York for the Islanders, 11 points ahead. JT Miller, 51 points for the Rangers, 1 point ahead. Erik Karlsson, 63 points, 13 points ahead. Jakub Voracek, 55 points, 4 points ahead. Sidney Crosby, 77 points, but only 5 points ahead. So, you know, again, when it comes down to MVP, I think the fact that there's somebody with 5 points less than him and doesn't play on his line says a lot about the fact that they have multiple MVPs in Pittsburgh. Brent Burns, 70 points, 7 points ahead, but he's a defenseman with 70 points. Tank, Vlad Tarasenko in St. Louis, 63 points, 18 points ahead of second place in St. Louis. Nikita Kucherov, 69 points, 10 points ahead. Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner are tied with 55 points to 3 points ahead of second place. A lot of depth in scoring in Toronto, which is why they're still in the race. Horvat, 47 points for Vancouver, 5 points ahead. Anemic offense from Vancouver. And it's got worse now after the trade deadline. It has been really sad. Nicholas Backstrom in Washington, 71 points, 13 points ahead of Ovechkin. And Mark Scheifele in Winnipeg, 70 points ahead, 10 points, or 70 points, 10 points ahead. So let's just go through and pick the guys that I think are the 5 strongest candidates for being single-handedly bringing their team up. So I would go with Marchand. I would go with Kane. I would go with McDavid, obviously. That's 3. It is hard not to give Burns consideration, so I'll do that. And this is where it gets tricky, because Backstrom is legitimate. Granlund's legitimate. But it's hard not to go for Kucherov, based on the fact that Tampa doesn't have centers. They just have wingers right now, and they're still doing relatively well. Now, the wing in Tampa, both left and right, fantastic. So I keep hearing about how they don't have centers right now because they're hurt. True, but their wingers are pretty damn solid. And having good wingers can overcome having iffy to bad centers. I know that from Vancouver over the years, where if we're lucky we have one good center and then the rest of them are just kind of there. It's happened. But there you go. So those are the point spreads. It's an interesting thing to look at. You know, does it make a difference? Well, yeah, because the guys who have a large point spread are either on bad teams like Verbata and Zetterberg, or they're genuinely head and shoulders above their teammates like Tavares, Carlson, Tarasenko, Kucherov, Backstrom, Scheifele. I mean, there's no real argument here. Now, Scheifele, you could argue Laine is going to be as good as Scheifele, but not this year. Scheifele's been fantastic. Pacioretty, 13 points more than second place. That's not peanuts. And it's an interesting thing to chart out. It's one of those things that now that I've got this board, I have to chart out. I have to sit down and figure these things out because it's fun. It's fun to do this stuff and figure that out. So, here's a challenge. Yeah, I could pause it, but I'm not going to because it's not my style. So here's a challenge to the 3,000 plus subscribers out in subscriberland. What other measurement can we come up with to measure potential MVPs? Because when you look at something like this, you can look at a Michael Granlund. You can look at a Max Pacioretty even. Guys you're not going to look at otherwise and say, you know what? This guy's having a pretty good season in relation to his other teammates. And find some unlikely candidates. So what other stats can we use? What other measurements can you think to come up with? So, and see what kind of player falls out. And which player do you think deserves consideration for Hart that's not being considered for the Hart? I mean, it stands out to me that Detroit's got Zetterberg with 57 points and his second place is 222 points behind. That's crazy. Because it's just crazy. They were supposed to have multiple players who were in the 50-point range at this time, and they just don't. So something's really wrong in Detroit. But anyways, that's just where I'm at right now with this, and I'd like to know where you guys are at, what you guys think, because it's an interesting conversation. I think the fact that you as a player score 15 plus more points than the second highest point getter means you're generating those points yourself. You're doing what you have to do. Potentially, this means that you're playing on the power play, you're penalty killing, you're 5-on-5, you're doing everything. A little bit of everything. I know in Marchand's case, he does everything in Boston. So there's that. With the Rangers, for instance, Michael Grabner, he scored all his goals at even strength pretty much. I think he's got one power play goal. And he's not on this chart. So is there an MVP thing for him because there's 5-on-5 goals, or does it hurt him? And I'm not saying that Grabner's a Hart candidate. I'm just saying that if he had more goals and if they were all 5-on-5, does that hurt? There's different ways of looking at it. Just let me know what you guys think. If you're just browsing your way through, hit like and subscribe. because I know you want to. And I will talk to you all again soon.